June 10th, 1977, Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, Tennessee. A man grabbed a metal ladder made from stolen pipes, placed it against the prison wall, lifted it to secure the hook at the top. He lifted it too high. The ladder touched the electrified wire above. Instantly, the current surged through the metal, through his body. The shock threw him violently to the ground, launched him nearly 3 meters back. For a moment, his companions thought he was dead. But James Earl Ray got back up. He had already escaped from prison once before, hidden inside a bread crate, evaded capture for over a year, traveled across 3 countries. Now he was trying again, from one of the most secure prisons in America, a fortress surrounded by 5-meter walls, electrified barbed wire, 9 watchtowers with armed guards authorized to shoot on sight. How do you escape from a prison designed to be inescapable? How do you build a ladder inside a maximum security facility? And what drives a man to risk electrocution for one more chance at freedom? This is the story of James Earl Ray, the man who escaped twice from America's most secure prisons. James Earl Ray's life was tied to crime from the beginning. He was the eldest of 9 siblings. His father was a con artist and thief. The family constantly moved from city to city, state to state. Whenever they pulled off a scam or theft, they would flee before police could catch them. This was during the 1930s and 40s, almost 90 years ago. James grew up in this chaotic environment, found no path to follow other than his father's. He chose the same criminal path, becoming a thief and con artist. The first time James was arrested was in 1949, California, minor theft, less than 1 year in prison. 3 years later, in 1952, Illinois, armed robbery of a taxi driver, 2 years. 1955, Missouri, attempting to steal checks via mail, federal crime, 4 years. 1959, armed robbery again, $120 stolen, about $1,000 in today's value. This time, the sentence was different. 20 years. Why? His extensive criminal record? Repeated offenses. Every time he was released, he immediately committed another crime, often armed robbery. The judge decided he was a danger to society. James was sent to Missouri State Penitentiary, the largest and most secure prison in the state, maximum security. During his time there, James spent years obsessing over how to escape, studying patterns, looking for weaknesses. Finally, after 8 years, he came up with the perfect plan. At the time, James worked in the prison bakery. This bakery didn't just produce bread for the prison, it also made large quantities that were sold outside. Every day, a truck would come to load and transport the bread. Over the years, James built strong relationships with his fellow inmates, especially those who worked with him in the bakery. He knew he would need their help. His idea was simple but dangerous. Hide in one of the bread delivery crates. On April 23, 1967, the plan went into action. One of the inmates pretended to injure his leg while working, to draw the guards' attention. At that moment, James climbed into a crate. His colleagues placed bread over him to hide him from the guards. James stayed hidden inside for several hours. He had made small air holes in the crate to breathe. The space was cramped, stifling. Breathing wasn't easy. But he endured. Finally, the truck arrived, loaded the crate he was hiding in. Once on the road, James jumped out, quickly looked for a place to hide, found a junkyard, stayed there until nightfall. The police launched search teams, but they couldn't find him anywhere. The search area was vast. His escape wasn't discovered immediately. After leaving the junkyard, James fled into the woods. The dense trees and isolated area made finding him almost impossible. Even aerial searches with helicopters failed. He had spent 8 years planning this moment, 8 years studying the prison, 8 years building relationships with fellow inmates who would help him when the time came. And now he was free. James kept moving, Chicago first. Then he managed to leave the United States entirely, headed to Canada, Toronto, then Montreal. After several months, he returned to the United States, Alabama, then further south to Mexico. In Mexico, James tried some bizarre ventures, including attempting to become a director of adult films. By March of 1968, he returned to the US and settled in Georgia. In less than a year after his prison escape, James had traversed the entire North American continent. At this point, James was a wanted man, but not at the highest level. Law enforcement wasn't expending all its resources to find him. Technology back then wasn't as advanced. No surveillance cameras, no sophisticated electronic tracking systems. That was about to change. On April 4th, 1968, James was in Memphis, Tennessee. He had rented a small room across the street from the Lorraine Motel. That evening, he entered the bathroom of his room, opened the window, aimed his rifle toward a man standing on the balcony of the motel. He fired a single shot. The man died instantly. That man was Martin Luther King Jr., one of the most significant figures in modern American history, the foremost advocate for African American civil rights. The FBI announced James Earl Ray as their prime suspect. They found a map in his room with circles drawn around King's residence and church. They found the rifle used in the shooting. All items carried James's fingerprints. James was placed at the very top of the FBI's most wanted list. A massive manhunt ensued. Having spent a lifetime evading police, James was no stranger to being hunted, but this time was different. Every law enforcement agency in the country was looking for him. He headed north to Canada again, forged a Canadian passport, used it to board a flight to London. From London, he traveled to Portugal, then back to London. On June 8, 1968, at Heathrow Airport, security grew suspicious of his passport. They detained him, uncovered his true identity. James Earl Ray was arrested. 2 months after the assassination, he was extradited to the United States, faced trial, initially confessed to the murder, later recanted. The court convicted him, sentenced him to 99 years in prison, effectively a life sentence. James was sent to Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, one of Tennessee's most secure facilities, maximum security. The prison resembled a fortress, housing some of the most dangerous criminals imaginable: rapists, murderers, serial killers. A harsh environment where even the slightest wrong move could lead to fatal consequences, where gangs controlled entire cell blocks, where violence was a daily occurrence. The prison was surrounded by a 5-meter-high wall, nearly a meter thick, built from incredibly dense stones, some weighing over a ton. Escape through those walls was nearly impossible. The wall was topped with barbed wire carrying a powerful electric current, strong enough to knock someone down and possibly render them unconscious. And even if by some miracle a prisoner overcame all these obstacles, the prison was surrounded by 9 watchtowers, guards armed with shotguns, handguns, and rifles, full authority to shoot any prisoner attempting to escape. When James saw all these barriers, he realized his best chance was underground. He spent a long time studying his cell, looking for weaknesses. The biggest one was the ventilation opening, a metal cover secured with screws embedded in concrete. Removing the screws wasn't too difficult, but the opening itself was too small, barely big enough for a child. Determined, James began using a spoon to chip away at the concrete around the vent, slowly widening the opening. Imagine digging through concrete with a spoon. It was bound to take months. Every night, James would carefully scrape away at the edges, then cover his work using a clever mixture of toothpaste and dirt from the prison yard, making it look as if the vent was untouched. During this time, James deliberately lost weight, knowing that the slimmer he became, the easier it would be to fit through. After months of grueling effort, James finally expanded the vent enough to squeeze through. Behind the vent was a network of pipes running beneath the prison. Sewage, electricity, heating, steam. At the end of this tunnel was a large ventilation fan. If he could get past the fan, he would emerge into the yard. During daytime, James had noticed a ground-level manhole in the yard. He believed the pipes beneath led to the power station just outside the prison walls. If he could get into those pipes, they would lead him out of the prison altogether. But there was a major problem. The ventilation fan had iron bars blocking access. There was no way to get through without cutting them. James didn't have a saw. He needed help from someone on the outside. That someone was his brother Jerry. James wrote a cryptic letter using a secret code they had agreed on during a previous visit. Even if guards read it, they wouldn't understand its true meaning. Jerry executed the plan with precision. He bought a small saw blade, hid it inside the sole of his shoe, removed the bottom layer, placed the blade inside, glued the sole back on. During the visit, the brothers chatted under the watchful eye of the guard, acting completely normal. They wore identical shoes, same type, same color, same size. Quietly, they swapped their shoes. The guard noticed nothing. James smuggled the saw blade back to his cell. That very night, he descended into the pipe passageway, began cutting through the fan's iron bars. Every night he worked, after 4 months, he finally cut through them. But the next challenge took him by surprise. The fan blades themselves, made of incredibly strong metal. James had assumed he could bend them by hand, but they refused to budge. He needed a pipe wrench. One of his closest friends in prison, Jake Morlock, worked as a plumber. He had access to tools, including a pipe wrench. When James confided in Jake about his escape plan, Jake agreed to join. He committed to providing the wrench. But another issue arose. How would Jake get into James's cell on the night of the escape? They weren't cellmates. Each prisoner was assigned to a specific cell based on a roster kept in a nearby office, written in pencil, allowing guards to easily erase and rewrite names when transferring prisoners. James noticed this, realized he could exploit the system. The office wasn't locked. Inmates could access it during free time. On May 2nd, 1971, the regular guards were on leave, replaced by less experienced substitutes unfamiliar with the prisoners. During recreation time, James snuck into the office, erased his cellmate's name, replaced it with Jake. That evening, the substitute guards relied on the altered roster. The plan worked flawlessly. Jake was sent to James's cell. At 2 a.m., after the last guard check, they executed the next step. They placed dummy heads on their pillows, then squeezed through the vent opening. Jake's larger size made it difficult, but he managed. Together they reached the fan, used the pipe wrench to bend the blades, created a narrow opening. But it was too small for Jake. James barely squeezed through. For Jake, it was impossible. Reluctantly, Jake returned to the cell. James continued alone. He emerged in the prison yard, headed straight for the manhole. Moving cautiously to avoid the watchtowers, he reached the cover, lifted it. A blast of scalding steam hit him. The pipes below were used to transport steam for heating the prison. The heat was unbearable. His skin began to burn almost immediately. Desperate, he climbed back up, sealed the manhole. Unfortunately, the escaping steam had caught the attention of the watchtower guards. As James poked his head out, they spotted it. The alarm sounded. James was swiftly apprehended. The investigation uncovered his entire escape plan, including Jake's involvement, the tampered vent in James's cell. Even Jerry's role came to light. Jerry had been waiting outside the prison in a car at a prearranged location, ready to help James escape further. He had even brought a gun and some cash. Jerry waited near the agreed spot until dawn. When James didn't show up, he realized the escape had failed. he headed home, later heard on the radio about the failed escape of James Earl Ray. His meticulously planned escape, which he had worked on for nearly 2 years, was completely foiled. As punishment, James was placed in solitary confinement for 2 months, complete isolation, no contact with other inmates. When he was finally released from solitary, his thoughts immediately returned to escaping. For someone serving a life sentence, escape was the only option. But now every guard was keeping a close watch on him. Despite the heightened scrutiny, James spent years looking for another opportunity. 2 years passed, then 3. By 1976, 5 years after his first escape attempt, James was working in the prison laundry. During some routine maintenance work, he noticed workers had replaced old metal pipes. The discarded pipes were left lying on the ground. Quietly, James took them, each about 1 meter long, hid them behind piles of laundry. He wasn't entirely sure how he might use them, but he had a gut feeling they could come in handy. By 1977, 6 years had elapsed since his last attempt. One day, while walking in the prison yard, James noticed something. The prison walls were topped with electrified barbed wire, but in one spot where the wall met the adjacent mountainside, the wire was slightly elevated, leaving a narrow gap, just wide enough to squeeze through without touching the live wire. On the other side, the ground was elevated, sloping upward with the mountain. If James managed to climb the wall, he could easily jump down without injury. The only question was how to scale a 5-meter wall. The metal pipes, he could fashion them into a makeshift ladder. James approached Jack Shelton, a fellow inmate who worked in the prison workshop. Jack was a seasoned escape artist with a history of attempts. When James explained his plan, Jack immediately agreed. He began smuggling more pipes from the workshop, one almost every day. Pipes were considered materials, not tools. They weren't strictly monitored like hammers or screwdrivers. Over time, they gathered enough pipes to complete the ladder. James designed it with a hook-like attachment at the top to latch securely onto the wall. James also brought in his cellmate, Earl Hill, a trusted companion who was willing to take the risk. Now the team consisted of 3. They hid the pipes in a small drainage trench near the escape point, camouflaged with leaves and debris, nearly impossible for guards to spot. During this time, James observed the guards' routines. The most critical watchtower was Tower 4, closest to the escape point. The guard assigned there was Floyd Hawks. James noticed something that worked in their favor. Every day, Floyd brought a newspaper to his post, spent his entire shift reading it, rarely lifting his head to watch the yard. A vulnerability they could exploit. James reached out to Jerry again, his brother always ready to assist. Jerry smuggled money in small amounts over several months. James would use it to bribe other inmates for a distraction. Jerry also prepared an escape bag, hair dye, raincoat, canned food, medical supplies, a loaded handgun. He buried the bag in a cemetery near the prison. The escape was set for Friday, June 10th, 1977. That afternoon during recreation time, James and his team began executing the plan. At James's signal, chaos erupted. The inmates he had bribed staged a fake fight, shouting, throwing punches. The guards in the yard were overwhelmed, focused entirely on breaking up the brawl. James looked up at Tower 4. As expected, Floyd was engrossed in his newspaper, completely oblivious. Seizing the moment, James and his team rushed to the trench, pulled out the pipes, began assembling the ladder. Less than a minute, the ladder was ready. James grabbed it, tried to position it against the wall. He lifted it too high. The ladder touched the electrified wire. The current surged through the metal, through his body, threw him 3 meters back. For a moment, his companions feared he was dead. But James recovered, shaking off the shock. Earl carefully took the ladder. With precise movements, positioned it against the wall, successfully secured the hook at the top. James, still shaken but determined, was the first to climb. Once he reached the top, his companions followed. On the other side, the elevated ground made the descent easy. But their escape did not go unnoticed. A few inmates in the yard spotted the ladder, seized the opportunity. 3 additional prisoners scrambled up. The last was David Powell, a prison cook still wearing his white chef's uniform. The bright white caught the attention of a guard in Tower 3, the furthest watchtower. This guard was alert. He aimed his rifle, fired at the ladder, struck another inmate attempting to climb. The inmate fell, pulling the ladder down with him. Chaos erupted in the yard, prisoners shouting, "Over the wall! Over the wall!" The gunfire finally startled Floyd Hawks. He fumbled for his rifle, accidentally fell to the ground. By this point, the 6 escapees had already made their way into the forest. The prison alarm blared. News spread quickly. The response was massive. Local police, state troopers, border patrol, hundreds of officers, the FBI. For the FBI, James Earl Ray's escape was particularly alarming, one of their most wanted criminals. The search involved ground teams, helicopters, bloodhounds scouring the dense forest. As soon as they cleared the wall, the escapees decided to split up, harder to track them individually. James's goal was to reach Route 116, then the cemetery where Jerry had buried the escape bag. But as night fell, visibility became a major challenge. In the chaos, James had lost track of direction. Adrenaline pushed him to run blindly. Deep in the forest, he realized he had no idea where he was. After hours of wandering, James gave up hope of finding the road. He pressed forward, determined to put distance between himself and the prison. For 54 hours, law enforcement teams scoured the area. 4 of the 6 escapees were captured within this time. But James was not one of them. He continued trudging through the forest, exhausted, hungry, disoriented. Finally, at 10:30 p.m., 54 hours after the escape, a search team's bloodhounds picked up James's scent. The dogs led their handlers through the dense forest, barking frantically. At 2 a.m., the dogs stopped at a pile of leaves, circling, barking. The officers surrounded the area, weapons drawn. One of them prodded the pile with his rifle. James emerged, hands raised in surrender. He had crafted the pile of leaves to conceal himself, hoping to remain undetected, but the dogs had given him away. Without resisting, James was arrested, returned to Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary. He later discovered he had run in the wrong direction during the escape. If he had gone the opposite way, he would have reached the main road, the cemetery, the escape bag. Instead, he had only managed to get about 10 kilometers from the prison. As punishment, his sentence was extended by 1 year, from 99 to 100 years, a symbolic addition that made little practical difference. James continued to insist on his innocence in the assassination for the rest of his life, claiming he had been framed, used as a scapegoat. Interestingly, even some members of King's family believe James was not the killer, pointing fingers at government agencies, alleging a larger conspiracy. To this day, debates persist about his involvement. James attempted several more escapes in the years that followed, but by then, the guards knew his tendencies, kept him under constant surveillance. Future attempts were nearly impossible. James Earl Ray died in prison in 1998, maintaining his innocence until his last breath. He had spent over 30 years behind bars, attempted escape multiple times, succeeded once, almost succeeded again. A man whose life was defined by crime from childhood, who became one of America's most wanted fugitives, who escaped from a maximum security prison by hiding in a bread crate, then tried again by building a ladder and climbing an electrified wall. Remember the question from the beginning? How do you escape twice from America's most secure prisons? The answer is creativity, persistence, and the willingness to risk everything. A bread crate in 1967, a makeshift ladder from stolen pipes in 1977. James Earl Ray, the man who escaped once by hiding in a bakery delivery, and tried again by building a ladder and climbing an electrified wall. He failed the second time, but not before proving that even the most secure prisons have weaknesses, if you're willing to look for them. And that brings us to the end of our story. If you like it, do not forget to like and subscribe and activate the bell button so that you can receive new videos.